For me, when I think about the incident with the Covington Catholic high school students, the problem is bigger than just the initial lies that the media propagated. It's also about what they did once their falsehoods were exposed, and how the media subsequently tried to absolve themselves of the major role they played in defaming these students and fueling the fires of a dangerous social media lynch mob. Even if the journalistic profession seems incapable of understanding them, the lessons from the Covington incident could not be clearer. Number one, independent verification and factual accuracy no longer seems to be a priority for journalism. Number two, the media is not a reliable source of truthful information, and everything they tell you needs to be independently verified for its accuracy and balance. Number three, just because lots of different media outlets, including supposedly reputable ones, are all repeating the exact same story, this doesn't mean that the story is true. And number four, and most worrying of all, the media seems completely incapable of self-policing and fully owning up to major failures of journalistic ethics and integrity when they occur. In fact, it is my contention that these serious failures of journalistic ethics and integrity are actually now ingrained norms within the culture of the journalism profession. This might sound harsh until you realise that the Covington incident is not an isolated one-off occurrence. It is simply the latest in a growing list of serious media malfeasance that calls into question whether basic standards of best practice journalism still even apply in the world of the mainstream media. The exact same week that the Covington incident happened in the United States, The Telegraph, one of the biggest newspapers in the United Kingdom, was forced to publish the following retraction about a story they ran the week before, which contained numerous falsehoods. Following last Saturday's Telegraph magazine cover story, The Mystery of Melania, we have been asked to make clear that the article contained a number of false statements which we accept should not have been published. Mrs. Trump's father was not a fearsome presence and did not control the family. Mrs. Trump did not leave her design and architecture course at university relating to completion of an exam, as alleged in the article, but rather because she wanted to pursue a successful career as a professional model. Mrs. Trump was not struggling in her modelling career before she met Mr. Trump, and she did not advance in her career due to the assistance of Mr. Trump. We accept that Mrs. Trump was a successful professional model in her own right before she met her husband and obtained her own modelling work without his assistance. Mrs. Trump met Mr. Trump in 1998, not in 1996, as stated in the article. The article also wrongly claimed that Mrs. Trump's mother, father and sister relocated to New York in 2005 to live in buildings owned by Mr. Trump. They did not. The claim that Mrs. Trump cried on election night is also false. Now, for those who weren't counting, that's a grand total of 8 lies in just one article. In December last year, in another part of Europe, Klaus Relotius, a highly acclaimed journalist for the prestigious German weekly Der Spiegel, was exposed as having fabricated at least 14 extensive pieces he had written for the magazine. Relotius had previously been awarded prestigious prizes for his supposed investigative journalism, including the European Press Award and Reporter of the Year from CNN Europe. In their official statement about the incident, Der Spiegel admitted that most of Relotius's articles included passages that were made up. He wrote about people that he never met or simply invented them out of thin air. He described scenes that never happened. In a 2016 story, he falsified details about 2 orphaned Syrian children and also included a plea to his readers to donate money to their cause. It has subsequently been revealed that the account number he included in the story for donations was his own personal bank account. But the most startling aspect of this incident isn't really the lies that Relotius told in his articles. The bigger problem here is that many of the falsehoods were so brazen that a quick Google search would have exposed him had editors and fact-checkers actually been doing their job. Again, in their official statement about this incident, Der Spiegel claims that we were always proud of our system, which includes numerous safeguards ensuring that stories are read by many different people. Our fact-checkers examine each story closely on the search for errors. Clearly that's not true though, because if it were, Relotius would have been exposed a long time ago. But what's even more astounding than this is the fact that when a fellow journalist who had collaborated with Klaus Relotius on a story discovered something that should have raised concerns, none of the editors at Der Spiegel believed him. In fact, according to the account of that journalist, the editors actually thought he was jealous of Relotius. Like I said earlier, it would be comforting to believe that the Covington incident was just some sort of weird and aberrant one-off media misstep. But it isn't. It's now becoming the new normal for big journalism. In last week's Covington incident, media all over the world propagated a story that not one of them had properly fact-checked for accuracy before publishing or broadcasting. They simply took a very brief video that had been posted to social media by an unknown person, and without verifying the credibility of that source, they took that brief video, which provided no actual context to what it depicted, and added the unverified statements of one of the parties depicted in that video, Nathan Phillips. And with little to no further investigation, they published or broadcast a series of reports and commentary which contained very serious accusations and judgments about the behaviour and motivations of the young people shown in that video. But within 24 hours of the media stories and the international outrage they had ignited, it was revealed that what journalists all over the globe had reported as fact was actually completely false. It became incontrovertible that for whatever reason, Nathan Phillips had made multiple false claims about this incident, and that all of the important details that the media had reported about these events simply weren't true. But by that stage though, some very real and very serious damage had been done. Firstly, a group of young people had been defamed with all sorts of vile and false allegations, and secondly, a deranged social media lynch mob which included major celebrities and unbelievably even some journalists had been inflamed by the false media stories and was subjecting these young people, their families, their school and their local community to all sorts of condemnation, harassment and threats of physical violence and even death. Now, the media has tried to play Pontius Pilate as a result of the harm that they have caused here, and they've metaphorically washed their hands of all responsibility by suggesting that social media is to blame for all of this. No, social media didn't cause this. You, the mainstream media, did. You made a decision not to verify and not to investigate the facts properly before publishing and broadcasting the falsehoods that you did. Social media simply amplified the effects of that unprofessional and immoral decision when your actions ignited the torches of an unhinged social media witch hunt. If the mainstream media had refused to publish articles about these events, or at least they had waited and properly verified and then published only true facts about this incident, there would have been little more than a blip on social media without anywhere near the same level of harms that resulted from the mainstream media coverage. Claiming that the internet is the real villain here and that you had no choice but to spread serious, unverified allegations far and wide once that video started trending on social media is quite frankly absurd. If that's true, then what you are effectively admitting here is that journalism and the practice of journalistic ethics is dead, and that mainstream media journalists and editors are now allowing profit-seeking greed and not principle to govern their professional conduct. Even when media mea culpas over the Covington incident do appear, most of them seem to be little more than carefully crafted non-apologies that are still trying to claim that the young people who were caught up in this incident were the perpetrators. Just consider this example from the supposedly respectable New Yorker magazine. Firstly, the author of the piece, who is an editor and regular contributor at the New Yorker, starts by trying to make the claim, in some detail I might add, that it was actually the Russians who caused Hillary Clinton so much strife over her basket of deplorables comment during the US presidential race. He suggests that not only was it Russian social media operatives that caused Clinton's comments to start trending, but also that without this social media spike, her comments would not have been given any serious media attention. These paragraphs alone are fascinating in the insight they offer about the current state of the internal culture of the mainstream media. Here you have an editor at a highly regarded media organisation still trying to blame Russians for Hillary's failings, and even more troubling are his suggestions that a US presidential candidate referring to millions of US citizens as deplorable people during a presidential election race is nothing more than a gaffe, quote unquote, that is not worthy of media attention. Quite frankly, that's an absurd and alarming claim to make. A gaffe is what happens when a candidate mispronounces their words, but calling millions of voters deplorable people is definitely not something so minor or insignificant that you would call it a gaffe, and it is definitely newsworthy because it speaks to the character of that candidate and how they view the people that they are seeking to govern. During an election campaign especially, it's hard to see how such a serious declaration about the electorate from a candidate could be considered anything other than extremely newsworthy. Yet here we have a journalist at a highly prestigious publication trying to suggest the exact opposite. Like I said, this alone is a very telling insight about the current state of the mainstream media, as is the fact that he also suggests later in the article that maybe this Covington incident could also have been caused by a Russian operative. But let's get to the important part of the article when he states the following. The sad truth, however, was that no one's behaviour was above reproach. The boys, using intimidating body language, shouted their school cheers as though they were at a pep rally and not on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Some seemed to mock Phillips in the way they sang and danced along with his drumming. At times they resembled soccer hooligans more than defenders of the sanctity of life. Phillips, meanwhile, mischaracterised the nature of the encounter when he first spoke with the news media. Among other things, he told the Washington Post that Sandman had blocked my way, when in fact he had been the one who approached Sandman. All the while, a group of protesters from the Black Hebrew Israelites, another religious group, insulted everyone, telling the Native Americans, "You worship the buffalo, a dead buffalo can't save you," and calling the Covington students incest babies. The fact that a supposedly reputable media organisation is allowing dishonest and misleading statements like this to be published days after the full facts of this incident are now widely known speaks volumes about the current crisis plaguing the mainstream media. Just consider the way he has condemned the young people involved in this incident by claiming that they were a gang of disrespectful and intimidating thugs. Contrast that with the way he refers to the multiple false statements made to the media by Nathan Phillips as merely being a mischaracterization of the incident. And notice how he doesn't condemn Phillips or pass judgment on his character for the lies he told. And again, he does something similar with the Black Hebrew Israelites, when he makes no strong condemnation of their behaviour and leaves out the fact that they also shouted other, far more vile and derogatory insults than the two that he chose to mention. The entire statement is a dishonest and unbalanced fudging of the facts about the Covington incident, and yet it is served up to us by a leading mainstream media organisation under the guise of being a fair and truthful account of these events. But notice how only one of the three parties involved in this incident, the young people, are being harshly judged and condemned for their supposed actions. And notice how his hyperbolic and emotionally loaded descriptions of their behaviour places these young people in the role of the dominant and threatening aggressor in all of this. Yet, of the three parties involved in the Covington events, they were the only ones who could rightly be described as not having initiated this incident. They were at the steps waiting for the bus, while the Black Hebrew Israelites hurled racial, homophobic and other slurs at them, and then Nathan Phillips led a party of people while banging a drum right into the middle of their group. And afterwards he went to the media and made completely false statements about those young people and how that incident had unfolded. Any honest person can see exactly what is going on here. This is little more than an attempt by someone from within the mainstream media to rewrite the true history of this incident in order to lessen the culpability of the media for their unethical conduct in all of this. Sure, what we initially told you about this incident wasn't 100% accurate, but just look at how badly those young people were behaving, and you'll see that we weren't that far off the mark. This is little more than an attempt to blame the victims for the harm that was caused to them by the mainstream media. It's the kind of vile and dishonest gaslighting that a manipulative abuser perpetrates upon their victim, like when a violent spouse tells his battered wife that if only she had cooked the dinner properly the night before, none of this would have happened to her today. Just a few days ago here in New Zealand, our biggest newspaper described the Covington events in these terms. It was the viral story of the week, but as the days passed, a more complex picture of what happened has emerged. Such dishonest commentary is not an isolated incident. I've seen the same or similar sentiments as these expressed by media here and abroad over the last few days. This rush by the media to absolve themselves of responsibility speaks volumes about their inability to accept ownership for their unethical behaviours and to admit that something is terribly dysfunctional within the culture of professional journalism. And this is extremely serious because, as we've seen with the Covington incident over this past week, that dysfunction has the power to destroy lives and place individuals and groups at risk of serious harm. I don't know what the answer is here, but speaking as someone who has been involved in media consultancy and training for the past 14 years, I can tell you that this problem is getting worse. And it won't begin to be resolved until the journalistic profession is actually willing to admit that they have a serious problem that needs addressing. Until that happens, sadly, this won't be the last time that the media causes great harm to people by acting without any regard for basic journalistic ethics. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please consider financially supporting the channel. The links for how you can do that are found in the video description below. See you next time on Left Foot Media.